Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Bobbie Jean Johnson Player. We'll be discussing her fantastic book, Until Now, The Love We Always Needed But Never Had Until Now. Available for purchase at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And I will say, Bobbie was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business. Author, Reputation Press Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, do yourself a favor and contact ARP. You can find out more information on them at authorreputationpress.com. And I'm so glad that we have Bobbie here on the line because she's the expert, okay? When it comes to this, she's written the book, literally, about this. So I'm very excited to be able to pick her brain, to learn from her, and really be able to receive a wonderful education. So sit back, strap in, and let's get ready. Bobbie, first and foremost, thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction. How are you?
I'm great, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, listen, the pleasure is all ours. We are very much looking forward to this because we know that there is going to be so much benefit to the words of wisdom that you're going to be able to portray. Now, we have so much information to cover, but let's hold off slightly before jumping into the book. Bobbie, start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself, please.
I'm 80 years old, the mother of one biological son, and between my late husband and I, there were 3 children. I have 15 godchildren, and I really don't know how many great-grandchildren that I have. I'm currently enrolled at Texas A&M University, working on my master's degree in social work. I have a broad range of jobs, but my career was in real estate and financing.
Bobbie, listen, your background is so impressive. The fact that you mentioned you're 80 years old, I would never have, from the pre-screening call to now, I mean, your energy, in your perspective, you're so lively. I was like, I would never have categorized that. I thought for sure you were in your 40s or so, or maybe if we're pushing it, early 50s. But wow, that is incredible. And congratulations on going back to school to receive your master's. That is wonderful. Best of luck with everything. It sounds like you have a wonderful family. And, of course, my condolences and my apologies on your late husband. Very sorry to hear that. But I know from the pre-screening call, he had a fantastic impact on you and your life. So it sounds like he was a wonderful man.
Wonderful. I mean, better than I could have ever expected. I didn't know there were people in the world like Victor. I really didn't. Beginning with my father, I did not know there were people in the world like my late husband, Victor Player Jr.
Fantastic. Well, listen, that is so beautiful. Without further ado, Bobbie, let's jump right in. Until Now, the love we always needed but never had. Until Now. Tell us a little bit more about your book.
This book covers a wide range of any type of abuse, neglect, struggles, and it goes back as far as childhood, because both of us experienced some abuse even in our childhood days. And we did not know each other at that time. But as we went through young adulthood on into middle age and the advanced age, we learned that the type of abuse that we experienced could have been avoided if both parties, especially within the marriage, had worked towards having a harmonious or a happy union. Unfortunately, two people coming together does not necessarily mean that happiness will occur. And in the part of our lives where both of us experienced domestic abuse in our marriages, we later learned that individuals enter into a marriage without wanting the happiness, without working towards the happiness, without keeping an open line of communication. And many times it's concern on their part, and many times the other person will work into or fall into the rut of their leadership. And nothing can come out of a marriage when you can't and you refuse to work together, when there is no line of communication, open communication. So because of that, we experienced this in our former marriages. But thanks be to God, He brought us to a point where we were able to have the life that He had predestined for us before we were born.
Bobbie, I remember talking to you on the pre-screening call, and you mentioned something that I thought was very, very interesting, something that you had learned from your husband. Now, you articulated that there are two different types of love. Talk to our listening audience. What are those two types of love, and really, why is it important to acknowledge which type of love you're receiving in any given relationship?
Both of us experienced romantic love in marriages prior to coming together. And in a romantic love, you learn that it's very fleeting. It can be controlling. It does not allow you to be the person that you really are. You are constantly in a roller coaster. You're trying to allow the other person to have total control of you. A romantic love runs on emotion. It takes away the beauty of who you really are and what can exist in that relationship. But a rational love is lasting. It's genuine. It's accepting each other for who you are, never trying to change you into being someone that you are not. A rational love is giving the best of yourself to your partner, expecting nothing in return. But fortunately, you always receive more than you could have ever expected that you would. It allows the husband to fulfill the biblical scriptures where it says the husband is to love the wife and she is to submit to him. Fortunately, when you have a rational love, you both can practice both loving and submitting. It does not become a problem to follow your husband's guideline. It does not become a problem for the wife to submit to the husband because he's showing her genuine love. He's showing her protection. He's given her security. He moves beyond just loving her. He simply adores her. And it is seen not only in the words that he says, but in the manner, his mannerism, just the simple way he looks at her. She knows that she is the only person that can capture his attention. And the same way with her. She gives him her total being. She becomes whatever he needs and never regret a moment of that. They talk to each other rather than at each other. And that is one of the things that I noticed that did not exist in my prior marriage, and he felt the same way. We talked at each other. But in the marriage that God allowed my late husband and I to have, we communicated openly. The line of communication generated so much warmth. It generated so much harmony and balance in our marriage. We could look at each other and just know what the other one wanted or what the other one would need at that precise time without uttering a word. I remember so many times my husband was an educator in San Diego, but we moved back to the country here in Texarkana, and he went through a complete metamorphosis. He developed and created his own rose garden on the north side of the house. And he would go out in the garden and pluck a bud. I just had little vases all over the house where each morning he would bring me a rosebud while the dew was still on the petals. And that gave me a sense of being the only person in his life that could bring the smile from his face, the twinkle in his eye. I just wish that everybody could experience a rational love. It may not be exactly like our love was, but a rational love carry you into areas that you never knew was possible. And that is what we had. We were together 8 years, 2 months, and 10 days. Never had a disagreement. We never had a misunderstanding. We never had an argument. We discussed things together. And if one didn't agree on something, the other one would not agree to it either. So I'm so grateful and so thankful for learning the difference between a romantic love and a rational love.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, Bobbie, what you're talking about is so beautiful. And the love that you each shared and the partnership that you shared with one another it's magical. This is things that a lot of times you see in movies, right? But often in real life, we don't get to experience it. And I think this is going into the next question. I think a lot of times in life, we don't experience that pure manifestation of love and commitment and true partnership because we miss red flags. Now, taking a slight turn, going a little bit more in depth and a little darker, because we know that your book deals with domestic abuse. And as I started the interview by saying, this is something that so many people, I don't have the specific number, but I wouldn't be surprised to learn that it was in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have experienced or are experiencing. Now, Bobbie, articulate to our listening audience any tips, please, anybody that's out there that is in a new relationship. What are some red flags that they should be looking out for that could potentially save them a lot of heartbreak and not going down that road where maybe they're in a romantic relationship? Again, speaking from my own experience, I can relate. I remember being in a romantic relationship, and it's great in moments, right? The highs are so high, but the lows are so low. And that duality is almost maddening in a sense because there's never a balance. Articulate to our listening audience, please, red flags to look out for to hopefully avoid domestic abuse.
One of the first things that I would certainly suggest that anyone pay close attention to is control. Many times the other person will show so much control until the female may overlook it and think that, oh, he just loves me, But that's not always the truth. Whenever the male, and sometimes it's the female who may do it, okay? But when you cannot have a life of your own, you cannot call who you want to call. Whenever you're in the presence of the other person, you can't be conversational with someone else. You can't look in the direction of someone else because they think that you're flirting with a man way across the room and you may not even see the man. But in their mind, you are. To the point of the way they hold your hand, the way they try to pull you in to them all of the time. In other words, they are saying, this is mine. Well, you're not theirs. You know, when you can't have a night out with the girls, when you can't call someone over to your house or invite a friend over to your house without you making plans to work against them. In other words, when they want to know your every move, when they want to know, and sometimes they may even get your cell phone and scan through it to see who you've been talking to or who you've texted. That's a main red flag that you should be concerned about. And if one ever just attempt to strike you, walk away. Don't try to rationalize that, because there is no rationalization in that. Bodily harm does not mean he loves you. It means that he is controlling you. And if you don't walk away from it, it's very possible you may lose your life in the final analysis. Watch the body language, the tone of their voice. Don't ever overlook those things. And some would go as far as to tell you what you should wear and what you shouldn't wear. It's just the little simple things that we take for granted, thinking that, oh, he loves me so much and whatever. But that is a form of control that if it continues on into a marriage, it gets worse. And you may lose your life behind it.
Bobbie, so many great things that you just said there, but one thing I really wanted to point out, I love that you started off with things that are, as you stated, really small, almost undetectable things, right? A lot of times in relationships, and again, I know this from people that I've spoken to. I know this from myself in terms of my own rationalizations that I've given myself in previous relationships. Having that issue where I can't even go out with some friends without a discussion or without an argument arising because of that. That's a red flag. And a lot of times, again, speaking from my own experience, you rationalize that, right? And you're like, oh, well, she just really cares about me that much. She really likes my company that much. Or he, or, of course, in any other scenario, speaking from my own experience. And it isn't until later on where things then start to get to that point where, like you said, now they're looking through your cell phone, right? Guys, if the trust isn't there, that's one of the main foundational pieces. If the trust isn't there in the relationship, forget about it.
Forget about it. It won't work.
It's not going to happen. Trust was one of the main foundational pieces. You can't build a house without the foundation, right? That bathroom on the second floor may be fantastic, but if it doesn't have a good foundation to stand on, that bathroom's going to fall down pretty soon.
If you're building on sand, the first big flood that comes through, everything at the top will be on the bottom.
Absolutely. And I love that you started there because, again, a lot of times when we think about domestic abuse, I think it's a really generalized idea and a perception that we take. We think about somebody being physically abused. We think about someone being verbally abused where it is yelling and screaming and almost, being attacked.
You are being attacked, Benji. You are. You are being attacked. And in many cases, verbal abuse is worse than a physical method of abuse, because the verbal abuse, you play it over and over in your mind, although they may have said they were sorry. But with the physical abuse, the pain, if it's a blow or whatever, a slap, it eventually goes away. But the verbal abuse, you're constantly wondering, did they really mean that? And every time something lead into what happened prior, your mind reflect back to what the verbal expressions were made before. Absolutely. And it just won't work.
No, absolutely. Absolutely, Bobbie. Thank you very much for articulating that. Guys, listen, what I love so much about this is we've discussed so much but we've barely scratched the surface. There's still so much more to be discovered. And I could stay here on the line and I could talk to Bobbie for hours. Unfortunately, we're out of time. And I'm actually glad that we're out of time because, again, it leaves the onus now up to you, the reader. Take it upon yourself. We know that we grow and develop as a society when we educate ourselves. Domestic abuse is something that, unfortunately, everybody listening in right now either has a personal experience with it themselves or knows someone that does. And that is such an unfortunate statistic to know that it affects such a high number of people. But I'm a very hopeful person. I'm a very optimistic person. And I believe that we can live in a world where that no longer infects us, right? But the way we do that is by drawing awareness to it, right? We have to shine the light on it. We can't shy away from it any longer. So guys, you know what you have to do. There's no way around it. Head on over to Amazon and Barnes & Noble and pick up your copy of Until Now by Bobbie Jean Johnson Player. You surely will not be disappointed. Bobbie, listen, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you once again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction.
Thank you so much for having me.